What's going on, housemates? Marcelo here, the founder of Wenger's House. I hope you're having a wonderful Monday wherever you're watching this video from. Today's video, of course, is about the breaking story that Edu Gaspar is set to leave Arsenal after 5 years at the club. So in this video, I'm going to be presenting some of the reports that broke the story, as well as, of course, giving my own opinion about what it means, what the implications are for the club, for Arteta, for this project. So getting straight into it, the story was originally broke by Sammy Mockbell, who said, Edu set to leave Arsenal in news that will arrive as a blow to head coach Mikel Arteta. The sporting director has played a pivotal role in the club's resurgence. And Graham Bailey said there have been issues between the club's hierarchy, which saw his position become increasingly uncomfortable. So Edu joined the club in 2019, of course, with minimal experience working in a club hierarchy. You know, he had some experience with the Brazilian FA, but that's really about as far as his CV went in his post-playing career. He immediately made an impact when you think about the contracts of Aubameyang and Ozil, which he sort of oversaw the termination of. You think especially of the Aubameyang situation and the All or Nothing docuseries where we saw it unfold in live time. And so that was really important, in helping us set the tone from early on in the Mikel Arteta era about what our club culture was. But not only did he help us build, a clear standard for what is not acceptable, he also helped build what is now one of the most exciting projects in Europe by signing young, humble, hungry players. And so that's really why we've come to love this club so much over the past few years as we've gotten exponentially better. And so with that being said, though, right, this summer in particular was a little bit less promising than the previous summers have been. Our three permanent signings, the first one being David Raya, but that doesn't really count because we all knew that when he joined us on loan from Brentford, he was always going to end up signing on a permanent deal. So that's really more a signing from last summer. Then there's, of course, Riccardo Calafiori, an excellent signing. We've definitely missed him in his absence, even though it's only been a few months since he arrived at the club. He's offered us something really different in attack that, it's already feels like a bit of a void with him not playing. Mikel Merino as well, not as exciting of a signing, and Mikel Arteta definitely crucial in that. You know that Arteta rates him highly. And he'll grow into this side more, and we definitely haven't seen the best of him in Arsenal colors. He hasn't really had the most favorable situation since he joined, between the various injuries to different players, which affects dynamics all over the pitch. But of course, namely Martin Odegaard, who is the creative engine of this midfield, and I think that Merino would benefit a lot from Odegaard's presence, both in how Odegaard leads the press, but also just Merino being able to feed Odegaard as well and sort of speed up our attack. But then you think of the two loanee signings, right? Neto, not really the most exciting signing. Obviously, a backup keeper is never going to be a blockbuster signing, but he is well up there in age. He's cup tied, at least until January, I think. So that was a bit of an annoying move because that's obviously really the only time where you would expect a backup keeper to play. And so we've played a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old in goal in his absence. It is important to have an experienced backup keeper, right? Because we don't want Tommy Setford to be our first choice if Raya were to get injured or suspended for the Premier League. But still, I have to say, I don't want to sound like I'm reaching, but the fact that Neto is Brazilian also makes it a bit more of an easy signing for Edu because, of course, there's just that compatriot aspect and the language aspect and his ties with the Brazilian FA. And then Raheem Sterling as well. And that's another former City player who Mikel Arteta has worked with. So the connection's already there. And I just don't think Sterling has looked very good in the times that he's played for us since joining. Obviously a little bit harsh. He had a slight lack of rhythm. He wasn't playing for Chelsea. He got iced out by Enzo Maresca since he joined. And so, I think it has been, or it was, a slightly underwhelming transfer window this summer, especially when you think about as well the fact that we didn't really replace Fabio Vieira or Emil Smith Rowe, and now with Martin Odegaard absent, we've struggled a lot. And Ethan Waneri should be getting more minutes, maybe, but we are too far into this project to be one injury to Odegaard away from looking completely flat in attack. Now, you can, of course, argue that Mikel Arteta had a big role to play in deciding not to replace Vieira or Smith Rowe, and we can't put all of the blame on Edu Gaspar because we just don't know all of the details. But it's still, at the end of the day, Edu is the man responsible for signing players. So he does need to take responsibility, of course, for it. So, between the lack of incomings, addressing areas of improvement in the squad, and the loanees that we brought in, it wasn't the greatest window. And so, on that note, Olu Oke said in a tweet, our management questioned both the Marino deal quality, Calafiori injury past, and they simply didn't want Sterling or Neto. First time I've seen such skepticism over our dealings. Now the team looks to have regressed. Some other key assets have had their stocks declined. Now, first to address the idea that it looks like we've regressed. I don't know how much I agree with that. I think that maybe is a slight overstatement, mainly because of how tricky the start to the season has been between the injuries and the suspensions, right? And you think about last season as well, it took us some time to gel before we ended up having an incredible second half of the season that was nearly flawless, really up until that home loss to Villa. That could have been the difference maker, right? And then in terms of other key assets having their stocks declined, I don't know how true that is. Again, it is November now, so I can't be talking as though it's still September or something, but I think our star players still are immaculate and they've had really strong starts to the season. I think the team as a whole just has looked a little shakier. And so I don't want to make too many, broad statements about the state of individual players and such, but I think it is really interesting to know. Again, I can't take this 100% as fact, because I also think that Marino still needs a little bit of time, like I said, to show his qualities. And once we have our full midfield options, he hasn't really played with Odegaard, and we haven't seen the setup of Rice, Marino, Odegaard. Partey's been one of our best players this season, it has to be said. So even a midfield of Marino, Partey, and Odegaard, we haven't seen that either. So of course, Declan Rice has to play. So it's a tricky situation, but I don't think it's fair to, write Marino off yet by any means. And Calafiori's been excellent, and I think that his injury situation is really just more about him learning to not go as recklessly into 50-50 duels as he does. He's a little too overly eager in challenging for the ball. So I think that's really just more a learning curve for him than signing a player with a serious injury record. Because as far as I know, his availability last season was excellent. So, all of that being said, right? And one more thing about Edu is his selling power hasn't been the greatest. And again, that's largely because of the situation he inherited in terms of contracts. But with Richard Garlick coming in, Richard Garlick is sort of the contract guru, who's been instrumental in us, securing these major contract extensions for the likes of Saliba, Saka. So, Garlick deserves huge credit. And so we saw this summer really the immediate impact of that improvement in contract negotiations with the selling of Nketiah and Smith Rowe. We brought in, considerable money for both of them, despite the fact that they didn't really play much last season, especially Smith Rowe, obviously. So we've improved slightly in our selling power, but I think that's largely, again, down to Richard Garlick and not as much Edu Gaspar. So all of those things being considered, where does that leave Arsenal? It is slightly concerning, I won't lie, because Edu is a very charismatic and charming guy. The club loves him. The players love him. He has, again, been really important in this culture that we've built since Mikel Arteta took over. And so it is interesting to think about what is Arteta's level of power at the club? Is he starting to have too much power, perhaps? It'll be interesting to see because, when you think about, let me find the tweet here quickly. Apologies, just give me one moment. Yes, Semi Mockbell also tweeted, Edu's departure at Arsenal will hit hard. Players love him, staff love him, even rival sporting directors love him. But a dilution of power and the allure of a multi-club position, maybe with Nottingham Forest, has led to his exit. So that dilution of power is a little bit concerning because if Arteta is the guy now that is, calling all of the shots, that could hurt the club's ability to act cohesively. I don't think that that is exactly the case. I really don't, because I think that Arteta has spoken openly about how much he appreciates and relies on, this open line of communication with everyone at the club. And I think that's part of why we've made such huge strides over the last few years. But again, an article that came out, which was related to to one of those tweets, was saying how that dilution of power was more about, the power being given to Richard Garlick and Lewis. So I don't think it's as much a case of Arteta being this dictatorial power. But regardless, you have to see now, what are our next steps going to be? Who are we going to bring? Are we going to bring in? Frankly, because this news is still so new, I don't yet know whether, who we're going to bring in to replace Edu. And so that's going to be a really important decision, obviously. And given how closely Arteta and Edu worked with one another on everything, really, we're going to have to choose wisely because they have had at this point, if he's really set to leave imminently, a really strong chemistry. And so that's a decision that we're going to have to be really strategic about in how we approach it. But I'm not overly concerned. Yes, this happening mid-season and this news coming out at a point where we're in a really poor run of form, and the Chelsea result on Sunday is going to be so crucial, really, in sort of determining where the trajectory of our whole season. I think it is that big. It's not ideal timing, but it should not affect our performance on the pitch. And it'll be interesting to see, who we bring in and what we do in January. Obviously, January transfer windows are always more quiet than summer transfer windows. But if we want to, get things across the line and keep with the pace that Liverpool seems to be setting in these first few months, 1 or 2 January incomings could be really important. So we'll see how the story continues to develop. Of course, I'm recording this only a few hours after the news initially broke, and so more and more things will probably come to light. But it is a bit of a big story, it has to be said. So obviously, I will keep you tuned in, and I will be watching how this develops very closely. And it will be interesting to see how the press conference goes tomorrow ahead of our game against Inter on Wednesday, because Arteta will naturally be asked a lot of questions about the news, and whether Arsenal makes an announcement before then will also be important, because it will sort of, remove some of the responsibility or the weight of the story from Arteta in the press conference. So we'll just have to wait and see how the club handles this, how Arteta handles this. But definitely not what I expected to hear to start a new week in such a crucial period of our season and our project in general. So as always, let me know in the comments what you think. Get involved. Like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications. I always forget to say that at the beginning of the video, but that's because I don't like to be a shameless plug. But it's sort of part and parcel of being on YouTube now, so I got to get used to it. But yeah, let's see how this develops. And thank you as always for watching, everyone. Have a great week, and I will be with you again soon to see how The Inter game goes on Wednesday. Come on, you Gunners. Peace, everybody.